Hey, how are you? My name is Jeremy. I'm going to be reading from this book, Leadership Theory and Practice by Northouse. I'm in Chapter 8, Transformational Leadership, on page 180, Criticisms. Transformational leadership has several weaknesses. One criticism is that it lacks conceptual clarity because it covers such a wide range of activities and characteristics, including creating a vision, motivating, being a change agent, building trust, giving nurturance, and acting as a social architect, to name a few. It is difficult to define exactly the parameters of transformational leadership. Specifically, research by Tracy and Henkin in 98 has shown substantial overlap between each of the four is: idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. The four is. Suggesting that the dimensions are not clearly delimited. Furthermore, the parameters of transformational leadership often overlap with similar conceptualizations of leadership. Bryman in 92, for example, pointed out that transformational and charismatic leadership often are treated synonymously, even though in some models of leadership, Bass in 85, charisma is only one component of transformational leadership. Others have questioned whether the four dimensions of transformational leadership, i.e. the four is, are the reason for transformational leadership, or if they are simply descriptions of transformational leadership. Anderson in 2015, Torsch in 2013. At present, researchers are not sure if these dimensions predict transformational leadership or just help to explain the presence of transformational leadership. In addition, Anderson in 2015 suggested that transformational leadership was credited to be used within social and political contexts, not in corporations. However, many researchers have been using the theory to explore managerial rather than political leadership. Another criticism revolves around how transformational leadership is measured. Researchers typically have some version of the MLQ to measure transformational leadership. However, some studies have challenged the validity of the MLQ. In some versions of the MLQ, the four factors of transformational leadership, the four is, correlate highly with each other, which means they are not distinct factors. In addition, some of the transformational factors correlate with the transactional and laissez-faire factors, which means they may not be unique to the transformational model. Tejeda in 2001. It has also been suggested that transformational leadership could be better measured and understood through a narrative perspective. Anderson 2015 and Ting-Blad in 2012. Laissez-faire. A third criticism is that transformational leadership treats leadership as a personality trait or personal predisposition rather than a behavior that people can learn. Bryman in 92. If it is a trait, training people in this approach becomes more problematic because it is difficult to teach people how to change their traits. Even though many scholars, including Weber, House, and Bass, emphasize that transformational leadership is concerned with leader behaviors, such as how leaders involve themselves with followers, there is an inclination to see this approach from a trait perspective. Perhaps this problem is exasperated because the word transformational creates images of one person being the most active component in the leadership process. For example, even though creating a vision involves follower input, there is a tendency to see transformational leaders as visionaries. There is also a tendency to see transformational leaders as people who have special qualities that transform others. These images accentuate a trait characterization of transformational leadership. Fourth, researchers have not established that transformational leaders are actually able to transform individuals or organizations. And Onakis, 2012. There is evidence that indicates that transformational leadership is associated with positive outcomes, such as organizational effectiveness. However, studies have not yet clearly established a causal link between the transformational leaders and changes in followers or organizations. However, there may be a glimmer of hope in this regard, as Arthur and Hardy in 2014 were able to use an experimental design to evaluate the effectiveness of transformational leadership intervention in remediating poor performance in an organization. This provides initial evidence that transformational leadership behaviors may result in some expected positive changes. More criticisms. A fifth criticism some have made is that transformational leadership is elitist and anti-democratic. Oh, that's good. Transformational leaders often play a direct role in creating change, establishing a vision, and advocating new directions. This gives the strong impression that the leader is acting independently of followers or putting himself or herself above the followers' needs. Although this criticism of elitism has been refuted by Bass and Avalio in 93 and Avalio in 99, who contended that transformational leaders can be directive and participative as well as democratic and authoritarian. The substance of the criticism raises valid questions about transformational leadership. Related to this criticism, some have argued that transformational leadership suffers from a heroic leadership. Euclid in 99. Transformational leadership stresses that it is the leader who moves followers to do exceptional things. By focusing primarily on the leader, researchers have failed to give attention to shared leadership or reciprocal influence. Followers can influence leaders just as leaders can influence followers. More attention should be directed toward how leaders can encourage followers to challenge the leader's vision and share in the leadership process. More criticisms. Another criticism of transformational leadership is that it has the potential to be abused. Transformational leadership is concerned with changing people's values and moving them into a new vision. But who is to determine whether the new directions are good and more affirming? Who decides that the new vision is a better vision? If the values to which the leader is moving his or her followers are not better, and if the set of human values is not more redeeming, then the leadership must be challenged. However, the dynamics of how followers challenge leaders or respond to their visions are not fully understood. There is a need to understand how transformational leaders affect followers psychologically and how leaders respond to followers' reactions. In fact, Burns in 78 argued that understanding this area, charisma and follower worship, is one of the central problems in leadership studies today. Bailey and Axelrod in 2001. Cool name. The charismatic nature of transformational leadership presents significant risks for organizations because it can be used for destructive purposes. Conger in 99, Howe and Avalio in 93. History is full of examples of charismatic individuals who use coercive power to lead people to evil ends. See you later, Adam! For this reason, transformational leadership puts a burden on individuals and organizations to be aware how they are being influenced and what directions they are being asked to go. Christine and others in 2011, Christie and others in 2011 warned that astute followers need to be vigilant and pay careful attention to the vision of their leaders, whether the vision is collective or self-focused, whether the leader is tolerant or intolerant of opposing viewpoints, and whether or not the leader is caring of followers. The potential for abuse of transformational leadership is mitigated when followers are aware and engaged in how they are being led. A final potential weakness of transformational leadership is the fact that it may not be well received by millennials. Anderson and others, 2017. As millennials continue to replace baby boomers, organizations are recognizing that they are having to modify previous ways of doing things to meet millennials' needs. Transformational leadership is one such example. Drawing from individualistic orientation of many millennials, Anderson and colleagues predict that transformational leaders may be less effective because this cohort may be less willing to collaborate with others to achieve common goals. Relatedly, today, today's transformational leaders communicate in a way to encourage followers to prioritize organizational and task needs and goals over individual interests. Anderson and others, 2017. However, it is predicted that this will be met with resistance as millennials have expressed a greater desire for work-life balance and want to work to live rather than live to work. Schweitzer and Lyons, 2010, and NG maybe. Finally, it has been suggested that because millennials expect frequent promotions and value extrinsic rewards, two of the fundamental components of transformational leadership, idealized influence and inspirational motivation, may be ineffective. Anderson and others, 2017. So that was criticisms. That's criticisms page 180 to 182, chapter 8, Transformational Leadership. See ya.